I still remember the clink of crystal glasses, the faint hum of city traffic rising from below the rooftop bar, and the sting of a sentence that split the air clean in two. Lucas leaned back in his chair, a smug grin painted across his face. He raised a glass of wine, an obscenely expensive bottle I had bought for Elena's graduation party, and said loud enough for everyone to hear Elena deserves better than a boring lawyer who hides behind contracts. Half of his shiny $1 million apartment should be yours anyway. The words hung there, heavy as lead. The glass in my hand tightened. I could feel the stem press into my palm. Someone at the far end chuckled nervously. Another pulled out a phone, angling the camera as if this moment was worth saving. It was. By the next morning, that clip would be plastered across TikTok under the caption, "Lawyer gets roasted at his girlfriend's graduation party." I sat there frozen. Elena blushed, her eyes darting away from mine. She didn't defend me, she didn't even scold him. That silence echoed louder than the laughter around the table. When you spend years building a life, studying through nights, paying down student loans, finally signing the deed on a Manhattan apartment worth close to $1.2 million, you don't expect to be reduced to a punchline over dessert. But humiliation has a strange way of arriving sudden, public, dressed up as a joke. I forced a smile, the kind of practiced expression lawyers wear in court, when the opposing side lands a blow, but the game isn't finished. My pulse was calm, my chest was quiet. Outwardly, I seemed composed. Inwardly, I had already moved 2 steps ahead. The party continued as if nothing had happened. Music swelled, glasses, refilled, laughter rolled on. I could see Elena's family mingling with her classmates, clapping her on the back, calling her the star of the night. To them, I was the reliable shadow, the man who paid the bill, who ordered the catering, who stood politely at her side, while others basked in the glow of her success. On the table beside me lay the envelope I had prepared as a gift, a certificate for a trip we had once dreamed of, taking together, sealed with gold foil. It looked absurd now, almost childish compared to the sting of Lucas's words. I slid it quietly into my jacket pocket. There is a rhythm to disgrace. First comes the shock, a sharp blow to the ribs. Then a quiet calm, almost like standing alone in snowfall. After that, the pressure builds beneath the surface, the need to hold face to pretend you are unfazed, while the laughter of others presses like a weight against your chest. And finally, the last stage fury, unspoken, burning low, waiting for the right air to ignite. That night, as Elena's friends snapped photos and Lucas performed his drunken theater, I passed through all 4 stages. By the time I walked out onto the terrace, glass in hand, I was already somewhere beyond humiliation. People often think revenge is loud. They imagine shouting matches, broken plates, dramatic exits. They're wrong. Revenge is quiet. It's the silence you hold when every muscle in your body begs to react. It's the patience of letting others write their own ending before you ever lift a pen. Lucas believed he was clever. Elena believed she was caught between loyalty to a friend and love for me. Neither of them saw the larger game. Neither of them noticed the way I listened. More than I spoke, the way I gathered details like pebbles in a pocket, each one heavy enough to throw when the time was right. I will tell you later what happened after that party. I will tell you how the emails surfaced, how the family dinner turned into a trial of its own, how the man who called me boring was brought low by his own arrogance. But not now. For now, remember the rooftop, the wine glass, the silence of a woman who should have defended me but chose instead to stare at her plate. Tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Because what came after that toast changed everything. Elena and I had built what I thought was a steady life together. I was 29, a lawyer, finally stepping out from under years of loans and sleepless nights. She was 27, sharp as a blade, working as a paralegal while she dreamed of law school. For 3 years, we lived side by side in the apartment I had fought so hard to buy. $1.2 million in real estate, one signed deed, one dream of a shared future. But there was always a shadow in the room, a voice just loud enough to make its presence felt. His name was Lucas. They met in college. He was the so-called artist, the free spirit who sneered at office jobs, who called 9 to 5 a death sentence. He lived on freelancing scraps, designing posters for coffee shops, menus for taco trucks. Yet Elena treated him like a guardian angel, the loyal friend who had shielded her through heartbreaks, especially the famous Alex, the musician who shattered her heart long before I arrived. Lucas never said anything openly cruel, not at first. He was too clever for that. Instead, he specialized in barbed compliments, words dipped in honey but sharpened at the tip. Elena, remember that camping trip we took? The stars, the silence. You just can't plan moments like that. You have to be with someone who gets your free spirit. He'd wink as if I weren't sitting right there, as if my work suits and case files were a cage he had freed her from. And Elena, God, she lapped it up. She laughed, she reminisced, she let him paint the picture that I was safe but boring. He was wild, he was freedom. I tried patience. Patience is part of my profession. You don't shout at the first provocation in court. You let the other side talk, let them trip on their own words. I told myself Lucas would one day overplay his hand. All I had to do was wait. Then came the night of my biggest victory. 6 months of my life poured into a single case, endless weekends buried in files. We won, and the firm celebrated. I opened my home for a dinner, invited friends who hadn't seen me in half a year. Elena insisted Lucas come too. Wine flowed, laughter returned to the apartment that had been silent for too long. For once I allowed myself to breathe. But Lucas, true to form, could not resist. He spoke of art and passion, drawing a line between creators and suits, staring at me the entire time. My friends exchanged glances, their jaws tight, but I smiled. I stayed silent. Then he leaned toward Elena, his tone dripping with false concern. I just hope you're happy. Jack's reliable, sure. A provider, stable, steady. He said reliable as though it meant lifeless. And then that smirk, that final cut. But let's be honest, Elena, you could do better. The table froze. The expensive wine in his glass shimmered under the light, a mirror of my reflection, calm but dangerous. Elena stared at her plate. She was embarrassed, but not at him. At me. After that night, the cracks widened. Elena defended him when I called his behavior out. He's family, she said. He was there for me when Alex broke my heart. You're overreacting. The truth is, betrayal rarely arrives with a grand announcement. It creeps in through these small concessions, these silences where someone should have spoken for you but chose not to. Then came the Instagram post. Lucas, drunk on attention, shared an old photo, he and Elena on some beach, years ago, her hair whipping in the wind, his arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Some bonds can't be broken. The world may change, but the right people stay." It gathered likes, comments, whispers. I walked into the office the next day and caught a colleague looking at me, then down at her phone, then quickly away. That was when I understood this was no longer private. Lucas had moved the battle to an arena where perception was currency, and Elena was complicit through her silence. One evening she stood in the kitchen, her voice calm but cold. I need you to apologize to him. I stared at her. For what? For disrespecting him, for making him feel unwelcome in your home. My home. The one I had bought brick by brick, mortgage by mortgage, with every hour of my life poured into it. That was the night I realized patience was not endless. That was the night I decided silence would not be my only weapon. But what they didn't know was, I had already started collecting more than memories. Winning that case should have been the pinnacle. For 6 long months, I had poured myself into it, working through weekends, surviving on coffee and late-night takeout, sleeping at the office more than in my own bed. When the verdict came down in my favor, the partners clapped my back, the clients wept with relief, and I stood taller than I had in years. So I did what anyone in my position might. I opened my doors. The apartment I had fought so hard to secure, with its sweeping view of the city, its polished hardwood floors and framed certificates on the wall, it finally felt alive again. I invited friends I had neglected, colleagues who had supported me from the sidelines. Elena insisted Lucas should come too. I bit back my instinct and agreed. The night began well. Music hummed, low glasses clinked, and laughter drifted out onto the balcony. I had pulled out bottles I'd been saving for years, deep reds and golden whites, each one a small victory in glass form. People congratulated me, shook my hand, spoke of the future. For a few precious hours, I allowed myself to breathe. And then Lucas arrived. He moved through the apartment as if he owned it, commenting on the art on my walls, sipping my wine like it was owed to him. He launched into a lecture about creativity versus conformity, looking straight at me while performing for the crowd. Some of us are driven by art, by passion, he said, swirling his glass. Others are content being reliable. That word again, reliable, said with the same sneer one might use for mold on bread. My friends stiffened. I saw one of them set his jaw ready to intervene, but I stayed still. I had learned the power of letting someone speak himself into the noose. Lucas leaned closer to Elena, putting on that mask of concern he wore so well. You're happy, right? He's good to you. Stable, a provider, reliable. He dragged the word out, savoring it like poison. Then he looked straight at me, smirk curling his lips, and said it. But let's be honest, Elena could do better. The silence after was deafening. Elena flushed crimson, but not in anger. Embarrassment, yes. Shame, perhaps, but not directed at him. No, at me for being the butt of the joke. She lowered her gaze, letting the insult hang unanswered. That was the fracture line. In that moment, I stopped being the partner in her story and became a placeholder, someone useful, dependable, but unworthy of defense. The party stumbled forward, forced laughter plastered over tension, but the damage was done. A week later, the cracks widened. I stumbled across an email thread. Elena had left her laptop open, her phone buzzing with notifications. Curiosity tugged harder than caution. There it was, Lucas writing late into the night. He doesn't see it. You're meant for more than a man who hides behind contracts. When the time comes, we'll share his space, his life. It will be ours. The words were brazen, entitled. Not a hint of shame, not even the courtesy of secrecy. He believed himself untouchable. I copied the thread quietly, storing it away. A lawyer knows the value of evidence. It speaks louder than rage. Then came the Instagram post. Lucas, drunk on attention, uploaded an old photograph of himself and Elena on a windswept beach, her head tilted toward him, his arm draped casually around her. The caption read, "Some ties outlast time. The world shifts, but the right people stay." It spread quickly, shared, liked, whispered about. I walked into work the next day and caught a colleague giving me that look, the one people wear when they know something you don't, when they pity you without words. Miss sank. Elena and I argued that night. She insisted it was harmless, just nostalgia, just Lucas being Lucas. Then her voice hardened. "I need you to stop attacking him. He's important to me. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't have a future." It was not a request. It was an ultimatum. I stood in my kitchen, the deed to my apartment tucked safely in a drawer nearby, and realized I was being asked to apologize to a man who had insulted me in my own home in front of my friends on the record of social media. I said nothing. Silence can be its own reply. But what they didn't know was that silence was also strategy. I had begun collecting the fragments, emails, photos, careless posts. Lucas thought he was writing poetry. I knew he was drafting his confession. All I had to do was wait for the right stage. The invitation came wrapped in warmth, but I could taste the edge beneath the words. Elena wanted me at her family's holiday dinner. A long table, candles, home-cooking laughter in the air, that was the picture she painted. What she didn't say was that Lucas would be there too. I considered refusing. By then, the cracks between us were wide enough to see daylight. But part of me wanted to witness how far she would go, how much of herself she would sacrifice to defend him. So I put on a suit, polished my shoes, and carried a bottle of wine under my arm like armor. The house was glowing with lights strung along the porch, a Norman Rockwell postcard from the outside. Inside, though, the air was tense before I had even taken my coat off. Elena's parents greeted me with polite smiles, the kind you reserve for someone you wish wasn't there. Her cousins filled the space with chatter, and there, at the far end of the living room, sat Lucas, legs crossed, a glass already in hand as if he belonged. Dinner began civilly enough. Turkey, carved potatoes, passed, wine poured. But the civility was thin ice. Lucas waited until the plates were full, the conversation loud, before making his move. "You know," he said, voice smooth, "Elena and I have been talking. Change is in the air. New year, new beginnings." He turned to me with that grin I had come to know too well. "She'll be moving soon. We're planning a place together. I think it's time she had someone who actually understands her." Forks froze halfway to mouths. A cousin choked on a laugh. Elena's mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. And Elena, she looked down at her plate, cheeks, pink lips pressed thin, but she didn't deny it. That was the dagger. Not the words from him, but the silence from her. I let the moment stretch. I could feel every eye in the room flick between us, waiting for me to explode, to demand an explanation, to make a scene they could dine out on for months. Instead, I cut a piece of turkey, chewed slowly, and set my glass gently on the tablecloth. Patience. Always patience. But in the silence, I also measured the weight of the folder inside my briefcase, resting against my leg. Printed emails, notarized timestamps, every careless line Lucas had sent Elena about sharing our apartment, about the contract guy who won't see it coming. He thought he was speaking in metaphors. I knew he was writing evidence. The dinner lurched forward, people pretending to eat, pretending not to stare. Lucas basked in the discomfort like a cat stretching in sunlight. He topped up his glass, winked at Elena, and carried on as if the matter were settled. Inside, my fury burned low and steady, but I did not show it. Fury is like fire. Reveal it too soon and people scatter. Hold it close, and you can use it to light an entire room when the time is right. By dessert, I had already made my decision. This was no longer a matter of insult or pride. This was attempted theft dressed in romance. A man scheming to take what I had built, every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice, turned into a prize for someone else. I rose from the table, smiled, and thanked Elena's parents for the meal. They looked relieved, assuming I had chosen dignity and retreat. Lucas smirked, raising his glass in mock salute. What none of them knew was that the briefcase I carried out that night wasn't just leather and metal. It was a weapon. But what they didn't know was by the next family gathering, I would be the one setting the stage. The next gathering was meant to be festive. Elena's uncle was retiring, her parents wanted a proper send-off, and the whole clan was expected to attend. They chose a long oak table in a rented hall, decorated with wreaths and candles, the kind of place where family photos are framed and hung for decades. I arrived with the same briefcase, the same calm smile. Lucas was already there, of course. He had a way of arriving early, planting himself in the best seat, stretching his presence as wide as it would go. He wore a jacket too loud for the occasion, checked his reflection in the glass of a picture frame, and grinned when he saw me. Elena sat beside him, nervous but quiet, a woman torn between loyalty and fear of embarrassment. The meal began. Toasts were made. Laughter floated through the hall. but beneath it all the tension throbbed like a hidden wire. I waited until the main course had been cleared, until glasses were refilled, and plates pushed aside. Then I stood. "I'd like to say a few words," I began, voice steady. Heads turned, chatter hushed. "We've shared good food tonight, good company. But family dinners, in my experience, are also about truth. And I think there's some truth that needs airing." I set the briefcase on the table and opened it. The click of the locks echoed down the hall like a gavel. From inside, I drew a folder, pages, neat corners, crisp each one, stamped and sealed. "These," I said, sliding them across the table toward Elena's father, "are emails. Messages between Lucas and Elena. Lines written in confidence, but confidence misplaced." Gasps rippled. Forks clattered. Someone whispered a prayer under their breath. Her father adjusted his glasses, scanning the first page. The words were clear, undeniable. Lucas in his own hand, declaring his apartment will be ours. He's too blind to notice. When the time comes, you'll have your name on everything that should have been ours from the start. I watched the color drain from faces. Elena's mother dropped her napkin. A cousin muttered, "Dear Lord." Lucas tried to laugh it off. "Come on," he scoffed. "Those are just words. Jokes between friends. You know how at Island." But I had anticipated that. "Jokes?" I asked. "Then perhaps you can explain the draft of a trust agreement you emailed her, complete with a forged notary stamp." I tapped the page, the inked seal shining under the chandelier. Gasps again, sharper this time. Elena covered her mouth with her hands. "This isn't a joke," I continued, my voice still calm. "This is attempted fraud. An attempt to steal an apartment worth $1.2 million to undermine a man's work, his future, his trust." The hall erupted. Voices rose, accusations flew. Elena's cousins demanded answers. Her father turned on her with eyes full of disbelief. Lucas cornered, sneered, and shouted, but the evidence lay before him like an open coffin. And then, almost as if scripted, a phone chimed. Someone had been recording the whole scene. By the next morning, the clip was viral. "Lawyer exposes scammer at family dinner." It spread across TikTok, LinkedIn, even local news stations picked it up. The image of Lucas stammering, sweating, caught red-handed. It was everywhere. The man who had mocked me as boring was now reduced to a meme. Reliable beats reckless. Elena wept quietly, her reputation crumbling along with his. She had chosen silence when loyalty was demanded, and now that silence spoke louder than any defense. I gathered the pages back into my folder, locked the briefcase, and lifted my glass for one last toast. "To truth," I said. "May it always find daylight." The room stayed silent, but no one dared look away. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Humiliation in public was justice. But justice on paper, legal, binding, permanent, that was still to come. When the clip from that dinner hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. By sunrise, it was already on TikTok, with captions like "Lawyer shuts down scammer." By noon, it had jumped to LinkedIn, wrapped in threads about integrity and the price of deceit. By evening, local journalists were calling my firm for comment. Lucas's face flushed, sweating caught mid-denial, was everywhere. The man who once called me boring had become the unwilling star of a viral lesson in arrogance. Memes sprouted overnight, his wine glass captioned "not reliable enough," his smirk frozen in pixels. It would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. The fallout was swift. His small design business, already fragile, began hemorrhaging clients. Contracts were canceled. Phone calls went unanswered. One cafe owner posted publicly, "We don't work with frauds." Others followed suit. In a city where reputation is currency, Lucas had bankrupted himself overnight. Elena fared no better. At her firm, whispers turned to stares, stares turned to avoidance. She walked into the office on Monday and found her desk half-cleared, colleagues suddenly busy with anything that didn't involve her. By Wednesday, she was on leave. By Friday, her boss told her she might consider finding other opportunities. The silence she once chose to defend him had now become her curse. And still, Lucas would not bow. He took to social media, posting long rants about being misunderstood about the system, protecting the powerful. He ended one post with a threat thinly veiled. "Maybe it's time I sued." But threats without teeth are just noise. I had the evidence, emails, drafts, stamps. If he dared drag this into court, I would bury him with his own words. What struck me most in those weeks wasn't the anger, but the quiet. My phone no longer buzzed with Elena's laughter, no longer flashed with invitations to dinners where I paid the bill. Instead, there was space. Silence where chaos had once lived. And in that space, I saw the pattern clearly. People reveal themselves not when life is calm, but when the storm hits. Lucas revealed greed. Elena revealed cowardice. And I revealed patience. But what they didn't know was that patience had another name in my world. It was called strategy. While their reputations burned, I was already at work drafting new protections. New trust documents, airtight contracts, deeds rewritten so thoroughly no one could ever again mistake my generosity for weakness. Because humiliation was satisfying, yes. But permanence, that was victory. Reputation burns quickly, but paper lasts forever. While Lucas howled online and Elena drowned in whispers, I sat in my study late into the night, the city lights flickering against my window. On the desk before me lay folders, stamped documents, and contracts as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. I rewrote the terms of my estate. The Manhattan apartment worth $1.2 million now sealed within a trust with my name alone. No one could lay claim by marriage, by deception, by sentiment. Every clause was reviewed twice, every signature notarized. I drafted new powers of attorney, new wills, new layers of armor. Some men buy locks for their doors. I build fortresses with paper and ink. And then I went further. With the clarity of betrayal behind me, I took the savings I had guarded for years, nearly $1.5 million, and placed it into something new, a technology startup focused on legal security. Digital contracts, tamper-proof wills, fraud detection systems. If Lucas thought contracts were boring, I would turn boring into the future. Investors bit quickly. The irony was delicious. The same arrogance that mocked me had pushed me to build something far larger than an apartment, far stronger than a single deed. Elena, meanwhile, tried to circle back. One evening, she appeared outside my office, eyes red, her voice trembling. "I was lost," she said. "Lucas manipulated me. I didn't see it until it was too late. Can we talk?" I studied her for a long moment. Once I might have softened at the sight of her tears. But not now. "You chose silence," I said evenly. "When loyalty mattered most, you chose silence. And silence has consequences." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "You don't negotiate with fraud," I told her. "And you don't forgive the silence that abets it." Her face crumpled. She left without another word. As for Lucas, he sent me one final message, a thinly veiled threat wrapped in bravado. "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but I'll find a way." I replied with a single line, "Contracts control everything." And that was the last I ever heard from him. What they didn't know was that by then my revenge wasn't about them at all. It was about building something untouchable, something that turned their betrayal into the foundation of my future. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest wounds, but I never let myself forget. Not the rooftop toast, not the holiday dinner, not the silence from Elena when her voice might have saved me. These memories remain not as scars, but as reminders. Months passed. The city moved on to its next scandal, its next viral clip. Lucas disappeared from social media altogether. The last post anyone saw was a bitter ramble about being misunderstood by small minds. His name faded from conversations except as a cautionary tale, arrogance without substance. Elena tried to rebuild elsewhere. I heard through colleagues that she applied to smaller firms, each one wary of the cloud that followed her. In law, reputation is everything, and hers was cracked beyond repair. As for me, I stepped into a new season. The startup I invested in, born from the ashes of betrayal, took flight. Contracts that could not be forged, wills that could not be tampered with, signatures that carried digital firewalls. Judges praised it, firms adopted it, clients trusted it. My $1.5 million grew faster than I could have imagined. Boring, they had called me. But boring pays, boring builds, boring endures. Sometimes late at night I sit on the balcony of my apartment, the same one. Lucas tried to claim the same one. Elena once dreamed of sharing, and I watch the lights of Manhattan blink like 1,000 restless eyes. I sip my drink slowly and let the silence settle. People mistake silence for weakness. They do not understand that silence is also choice. You can speak too soon and lose everything. Or you can wait and let the world hand you your moment. I waited. And when my moment came, I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't break. I simply opened a folder, slid papers across a table, and let the truth speak for itself. If you think Morgan made the right move, comment right. If you would have done something bolder, share your idea. Because at the end of the day, families and friends will test you. Some will betray you, and some will laugh at your silence, not realizing silence is where the sharpest weapons are forged. Contracts control everything. Remember that.